Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop, and I am your co-host, Ray Russell, along for this fun voyage here as we begin a topic that I hold very near and dear to my heart, as do a lot of you out there. Lots of feedback. In fact, the most feedback yet on social media for the topic we have upcoming that we begin here this week on the Wrestling Stoop. It's Bob Roop's time in the Mid-South territory, run by promoter Cowboy Bill Watts. Going to talk about Bob's time there in 1981, in 1982. Going to talk all about all the great names, all the angles that Bob was involved in, backstage stories you may have never heard before, and some other fun stories Bob plans to share as well. Lots to talk about here. The Junkyard Dog, Ted DiBiase, Paul Orndorff, Bob Orton, the Iron Sheik, the Wild Samoans, Big Cat Ernie Ladd, Mr. Olympia Jerry Stubbs, of course, the Cowboy himself, Bill Watts, Buddy Landel. We're going to get into all of those names and so much more here over the next several episodes of the Wrestling Stoop. And it all begins with the first one. We're going to talk about Bob's arrival in the Mid-South territory, some of the initial talent that he encountered there, and we're going to move on from there, going to have a fun time. But in order to do all of that, we got to bring the man himself back onto the show. So let's do that, shall we? Without any further ado, let's welcome him back. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Roop.
Hey, how you doing, Ray?
Doing good.
I missed you. It seems like more than a week since I've talked with you. Oh, wait a minute. It has been, hasn't it?
It has been about a couple weeks, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little recharged. I thought I would come back recharged, but now I understand what they say when they say you need a vacation after your vacation, because I come back home and there's so much laundry, so much cleaning to do. And now all this, the summer hit early. Really, it's like 80 some degrees here in Ohio. So I got to imagine it's fairly close to that in Michigan as well.
Well, see, you made a very, very, very smart move for your marriage, but not that great a move for your household. You took your wife with you. Well, if you leave them home, they'll do the dishes and the laundry and all, just out of malice because they're pissed off at you. I'm just kidding.
The heel heat already right out of the gate here this week.
Well, that's me, I had kids on my bus beating on me. I mean, once a heel, always a heel, I guess. But, it's good to be back.
I talked to you a little off air about this episode and the future episodes we're going to be doing here, covering the Mid-South territory, your run in Bill Watts's Mid-South Wrestling circa 1981 and 1982. And I told you, once we pop a show, once a show comes out, we get tons of likes, lots of response, lots of people engaging. But leading into the shows, we just get, a few dozen people. They like it. They're waiting for the show to drop before they pass judgment on it. But in this instance, I couldn't believe it. In less than 48 hours after announcing that we were heading to the Mid-South territory on social media, over 1,500 likes on Facebook. Unbelievable.
Wow. That's great. I'm really happy to hear that we have that kind of response out there. You get to a certain age, you realize it's not, and you look back on a lot of the people in your life that have passed away and passed on, and you're still here. You get to see that really it's not the trip or the leg. It's a journey of your whole life that has meaning. You might not know what you should do, but you know a lot about what you definitely shouldn't do. And what you shouldn't do is never go to one of those fan fests without taking your wife. It's just not a good idea.
Well, I was like one of maybe 2 or 3, so I was one of the very wise few, I suppose. But we had a great time, and we were there for longer than just the convention, so we were able to enjoy ourselves some in between everything that was going on there. And like I told you off air, Stan Hansen, Ron Simmons both said hello. And so we're back in business now, and I'm happy you're still here, and I'm happy we're back in action here this week.
Yeah, me too. I'll make it public, my appreciation that Ron and Stan would reach out and say hi. It means a lot, guys that hit as hard as they hit, even when you're working, they can afford to say whatever the hell they want because nobody's going to give them any crap about it.
That's right.
So, or like that story we talked about a few sessions back about Ron Simmons and Butch Reed in a dressing room with
the Steiners.
With the Steiners.
I about kicked myself in the ass. Ron had took off to go catch a plane. He had to leave right after the event, and I was going to go tell him that story, and he was already gone, and I said, damn! So unfortunately, I didn't get to tell him.
We'll get him some other time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got to see those guys. They're definitely part of my history.
Right.
Brian left.
Sure. Later on. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron came in. We didn't have a lot of dressing room time together. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And the same with Stan. My dressing room time with Stan was exclusively working for Ole, I'm pretty sure. So it was during those 3 years.
Stan spent a lot of time in Japan, that's for sure. I believe he's up in Colorado or something now, though, enjoying retirement there.
Oh, he had the smartest career. He got over in Japan, and he got himself booked 26 weeks a year there. And he came home. He didn't have to work if he didn't want to. He could be a Mr. Mom with his kids and be home and have plenty of money and security, and give them all the things they needed, and just really smart. Some guys would have wanted to do both. They would have wanted to have Japan and then come home and take that notoriety and try to build the same thing in the United States. But Stan was really smart because, now this is what happens, folks out there. I didn't get a chance to expound on any of my philosophy last week, so I'm doubling up this week.
Yeah, well, that's totally cool. Yeah, I mean, Stan looked great. He was, for his age, and, he just looked great. He got around great. It's amazing considering how many matches he had over there in All Japan working for Baba. But yeah, still, there's only one Stan Hansen, that's for sure. But I'm very excited this week, Bob, because we're in my wheelhouse now. A lot of video footage out there of this time frame, especially 1982, because if we go back in the early 2000s, the Watts family, they released all of the footage. Once it went from reel to VHS videotape at the end of 81, that's a lot easier to clean up and convert and distribute. And thus they began selling basically all of the TV from December of 1981 all the way through basically the demise of Mid-South Wrestling. And so I was able to watch pretty much, the majority of your run here, not the first few months, but most of it is out there so everybody can go and find it and enjoy. It's all over YouTube, by the way, guys, if you're looking for it. But yeah, so that's going to be fun. A lot of people, I think that's what's drawing a lot of people in because they can relate to this era and they can watch along if they want to. And they know this time frame better. And they certainly know a lot of these names because a lot of these names will even go on to work for Crockett and Turner and, of course, the WWF and Vince McMahon. So it's going to be a fun ride here. Before we get going, too, I got to say thank you, as always, to your doppelganger, Jeff Sharkey, for the many clippings and results he sent me here for this research. And a bigger thank you to Brian Achman, who had the wherewithal all the way back in the years of 1981 and 1982 to write detailed notes of every episode of Mid-South Wrestling in a notebook. And he took pictures and he sent it to me and he said, hey, if you can't read something, I'll break it down for you. We've had great conversations. He's been writing me in detail, just the way some of the things played out on TV. He has a great memory, and I can't wait to talk about it with you week to week.
Wow. What a nice thing to do. I mean, hey, you talk about showing respect for something, to go to that effort to, not just to record it, but to analyze it and, maybe give opinions about it in terms of how it could be improved from a fan's standpoint, a spectator's point of view. That shows a lot of class. I'm really, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. And
Jeff, and what was the other fellow?
Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jeff.
Just
appreciate you guys.
Priceless information, not just about you, but just about the territory in general, preserving wrestling history. He held on to these results for more than 40 years before they saw the light of day because a lot of people, they just, they work so hard. They want to save and cherish what they built. But he said he realized that if he didn't put this out there, that, it would be lost to time. So I appreciate after 40 plus years that he gave me the keys to his vault, so to speak, here with this, again, priceless information to kind of look over everything that happened on these television episodes.
Right. Things happen. I'll give you an example from my own family background. When my dad died back in the 80s, so it's been a while. I mean, it still hurts, but it was a sudden passing. And my mother was in such shock that she wanted to get rid of everything in the house. I actually took off after my dad passed away. I took 6 months off. It was right before I went from Mid-South to Atlanta with Ole.
Mm-hmm.
I took the time off and went off and tried to get my mother's affairs in order because she was devastated. She didn't have anybody there to help her. And what she wanted to do, and she'd done it before I got there, was to have my younger brother load up a Suburban with stuff from the garage and things that had been family mementos. I'll give you an example. One of them had been a saddle from her mother-in-law, my dad's mother. Back in the days, they were around before automobiles. So, and even after automobiles, my grandfather was a doctor. He either rode a horse or he took a buggy, a horse-drawn buggy, and for his calls, he was like going out way out in the country in rural Virginia. So my grandmother's saddle had a lot of sentimental value to my dad, but to my mother, it was just a big leather thing hanging in the garage. Well, it has sentimental value to me too, because I remember my grandmother. I loved her dearly. Well, that was just one example of one item that my mother had. My brother just throw all this stuff in the back of his Suburban without even looking at it, and just taking it to the dump. It was taking and throwing it away, and so I can see that happening with the leftover TV stuff, like with the Watts family.
Mm-hmm.
If they weren't involved in the business itself, and they had something else going for them, and I imagine Bill, I don't know the history there, but I'm sure Bill wanted to get his kids educated and giving them an opportunity to do something other than wrestling if they wanted to. You know, they didn't look at that as having a real intrinsic value, either that or they looked at it in another way, especially in the digital age. By having it out there, that'll make it available forever. Because now that it's out there, it's not going to disappear. You can't get rid of all of it. All the copies that are made, you know, there's probably how many millions of copies are out there already, right?
Right. And the majority of this also, you know, WWE did purchase the rights to this footage as well. So a lot of it's on Peacock as well, even though somehow the Watts family still are, I believe they're still selling it on their own as well. So, but it's all over YouTube. There's 100,000 different ways to go watch any of this right now. So it's going to be fun that people can go and check a lot of this out after we discuss it. Now, the first few months do not exist that we know of anyway. Perhaps they're on reel somewhere. And again, that takes a lot of money to clean up and transfer over. So VHS a lot easier to handle. And that's kind of where it starts, December of 81. But you start all the way back on your birthday, July 22nd, 1981. You come into the territory on your 39th birthday. So happy birthday, Bob Roop. I think I asked you before, and I kind of remember the answer, but I'm going to ask you again because now we're actually discussing the territory. Who called who? Did you call Bill or did Bill call you?
I called Bill. I was talking to Buddy Landel. Buddy was working out for Bill at the time. And Buddy just, I don't know if I brought it up or, I was working with the Poffos.
Right.
And I was very, very, very unhappy. We had a stake in their promotion, and that kind of held me in there, but I didn't enjoy it at all. I mean, it was the worst possible time in wrestling business, but, and Buddy just said, Bob, you ought to come out here. He said they got their, and what he was talking about was, Scott Irwin, what was this wrestling
Super Destroyer. Super
Destroyer was getting ready to leave. So they needed a single heel. And I don't know, Bill apparently hadn't contracted anybody yet. So I called him. As soon as I hung up with Buddy, I called him and see what he'd say. I didn't know if I was going to be blackballed from the attempt to try to do a hostile takeover, but no. Bill just said, yeah, come on, you got a date. Come in maybe a month from now, whenever it was. Mm-hmm. So, we got a story coming about dealing with Randy Poffo and his father, Angelo Poffo. Not Lanny. Lanny wasn't involved in, but Randy and Angelo were like a couple of mafia bosses when I was trying to get them to pay me my interest in the company before I left. They were trying to stiff me. I went to their house with a baseball bat. I walked up and I set it right outside the front door on the front porch, just out of sight before I rang the doorbell. And I had a pair of brass knucks in one pocket and a box cutter in the other. So I was ready. I was ready to fight, but with them. I figured they probably had 5 or 6 or 8 guys waiting for me, hiding somewhere. So I wanted to be prepared. Because if they were going to tell me, they owed me about $6,000, and if they were going to tell me no, I was going to take it out of something. So anyway,
let me ask you. Yeah, sure. I was just going to ask you how much of that did you get, but we'll save that story then. That's fine.
Yeah.
When we get to the ICW, that sounds like a fun time, and that makes sense because you were actually the ICW TV champion until about a month before you jumped over here to the Mid-South and you dropped the belt for your many times tag team partner. You drop it to Bob Orton, who's also going to come over here very shortly after you or right around the same time as you to the Mid-South territory. But right now, here we are, July 22nd, 1981, your 39th birthday, and you debut at the Irish McNeil Boys Club, Shreveport, Louisiana, at a TV taping. That's actually going to air a couple weeks later here. But you come in as a babyface All-American, a former Olympian, which is right up the Cowboys' alley, you got to believe.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Roop makes his debut, and you talked about this, as a babyface here.
I hated it. I felt like a Simon Legree in a tutu. I just felt like, oh man, they gotta know by now. It's not possible for me to be a babyface. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that was it. And Bill, he worked real hard to get me over too as a babyface.
And yeah, that's it's really interesting the way they do that. They bring you right in, and in your very first match on your very first show, happy birthday, Bob Roop, because you go over on the Super Destroyer, Scott Irwin, under the hood, and you win the Louisiana Heavyweight Championship in your very first match. So you go from wondering if you're blackballed, can I even get a job with the Cowboy, to here you go, here's the Louisiana title in your very first match here in the territory.
Wow. I'm curious. If that match was taped, then obviously it was TV, it would have been. So if everybody saw it, and I'm not positive if that's the finish I want to tell you about, if it was for this match, it should have been, because you talk about getting somebody over. Super Destroyer, Scott Irwin, had a finish where he would have you sitting on the turnbuckle, Rob.
Superplex.
Yeah, the superplex. Right. I didn't see anybody do it in the world up to that time. And plus, he was such a big guy. He was 6'4" or 5. So he would stand up on the second rope, and he would get you up, and he'd give you like the suplex. He lift you straight up in the air. Well, with him standing on the second rope, and he was strong enough to do it.
Sure.
Your feet are probably 15 feet in the air. And then he falls over backwards, and you hit, just wham. It's seeing on that one, seeing's believing. Anybody watching that, anybody who's saying, well, I'm convinced down to the marrow of my bones that this is all play, acting, put on. But by God, that's got to hurt, because it just looks so awesome.
And it's a shame that today they do it off the top rope, both men standing on the top rope, and still it's not a finisher, in this day and age.
Well, and they've got to the point where nobody's been set on fire and allowed to stay on fire until they're burned to a crisp yet. But I don't know where they're going to go. I don't know where they're going to go after some of the stuff I'm seeing. They're doing stuff where people have said, we want to see who can break somebody their neck the worst. This guy didn't do a good bump. He's only crippled from the waist down. This other guy, now he's crippled from the eyebrows down. He gets the award. Yeah, well, anyway, Scott, this is a fantastic looking move. I'd never seen it before, and I'd never done it before, but you can't practice it. Well, you could, but Scott and I were certainly going to be able to do it. Well, of course, you do that move to somebody, you beat him. Well, he did it to me. If Bill didn't do this on the first match, I'd be really surprised. And I should remember, but unfortunately, I worked with Scott, I don't know, 25, 30 times over the next couple months.
Right.
So I don't remember everything we did, but he covered me 1-2, and I kicked out.
Wow. Kicking out of his finisher. We didn't really kick out of finishers back in those days. We protected the finishers, right?
Well, I didn't maybe kick out, like throw him off like a strong man.
Right.
But I got a shoulder up. And I laid there like I was out of it. And Scott booted me a couple times, put me up there, work around towards doing it again. We did some kind of shuffle, and I ended up giving him a shoulder breaker and beat him 1, 2, 3. And you talk about getting over. People know. If the people in the TV audience, if they're sitting there, half of them are sitting there with their jaw hanging down, you know you got over because they've seen everything.
So I have that finish, very similar to what you're describing here, based on a fan that wrote in that attended a match between you and the Super Destroyer. Now, this was not TV. This was actually August 26th in Jackson, Mississippi. You're going to do a lights out rematch with the Super Destroyer. And that seems to be possibly the match you're recalling here is the lights out match here between the two of you guys in Jackson.
It's very possible. We didn't have the internet back in our days.
No.
So
I didn't have 12,000 followers either, giving me all this information. It was like a floodgate. The minute I said we're doing Mid-South, I mean, I probably have half an arena's worth of fans sending me messages. Oh my God, I remember this, I remember that. So I kind of got to weed through it and whatnot. And of course, we always get the one smart ass that every time I tell the topic we're going to do, he goes, "Oh, did he try to steal the Cowboys' territory too?" But that's another person for another day to get into. We're not going to let him, rain on this parade because I'm having a great time already. What I wanted to do was tell you a little bit about this TV match because we go back to Brian Achman, who took detailed notes. He talks about this match at length, and he doesn't have full details, but he says he may be a little fuzzy about his memory, but this is what he remembers happening in this matchup, your debut. He says the best he can recall, they didn't really put you over as anything big when you came out. They wanted to surprise the fans, so you just kind of come in as for lack of a better term, sort of a generic wrestler. And Frank Dusek was the manager of the Super Destroyer at the time, and he kind of just shrugs it off, and he goes over to commentate for this match. He doesn't even feel he needs to be at ringside, so he goes over to talk with Boyd Pierce on commentary. Meanwhile, here you are in the ring holding your own. And Dusek, he realizes there's some, problems here, so he leaves commentary and comes back over to ringside, jumps up on the apron, but that's when you slam Super Destroyer into Dusek, then you scoop him up and deliver your patented shoulder breaker to score the win and capture the Louisiana title. Your first night there, nobody knew who Bob Roop was, but now everybody does.
Wow. I should have talked before the show, I guess, and I've gotten that information. Well, that's a good one. That's perfect because, it could have been even closer than that. Just me winning,
right.
Me getting my hand raised, getting a DQ even, count out would have been something, but actually pin it. And it's another thing with guys like Scott, big, strong man like that. That shoulder breaker is convincing enough that they believed that it would keep a man down. That big.
That's a big boy to be. I know you were in great shape back then, but that's still a big boy to get up and drop in that shoulder breaker spot back in that era. So I'm sure that had to be a sight to behold, and I'm sure the crowd went nuts for it. Unexpected, because I'm not saying they used you like an enhancement talent, like you came in as a complete nobody, but I guess the way Brian remembers it, they didn't really build you up, so nobody really expected you to have a shot. And here, Frank Dusek goes, "Holy shit, who is this guy? I got to get back to ringside." And of course, the interference backfires and boom, not only do you pin the Super Destroyer, but you pin him with your finisher to get that over rather than the old schoolboy on that heel collision.
Well, in the years before Bill came back and created a new territory, he took sabbaticals we talked about this before, but he took sabbaticals with Vern Gagne and in Georgia, I think, I'm not sure who was running at the time. And then he was in Florida. So he picked the mines and he got to see not only his own ideas, but one of the things when you're a booker, you have guys come to you. We talked about that, Bobby Shane's strategy of getting himself over.
Yeah.
They come to you with their own ideas. Well, even if somebody, now, George Becker, the promoter, the booker for Fred Ward Sr. in Charlotte, he kept a notebook. He kept a notebook of all these finishes, not finishes, but angles and things. He had like 8 or 9 binders full of stuff. And that's what Johnny Weaver, when he started booking, that's what he used. He just grabbed the notebooks out and he'd go back and he'd look at angles. And that was great to do that. It was smart.
Oh, absolutely.
Shakespeare brought up, there's only a couple of dozen, there's more than that.
I think it was like 19.
Finite number of actual finishes that you can't expound on them without losing their effectiveness. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to try to get up that same kind of thing. You got to create a different pathway of getting up there. Yeah, so guys would come to him with different ideas. Well, Bill, as a booker, he was able to pick the brains. A lot of the people working up there for Vern were heavy hitters,
Right.
and so he could pick their brains. I'm not sure how much Vern was involved in the booking, and then come down to Georgia, and then. But I know I don't even know in Georgia either, but I know in Florida, because Bill was still booking when I came there the last time. He would be in the office, and Eddie would be up there too. So he was kicking around ideas with Eddie. And so by the time Bill went back to start his own business out there, he had all this information. He had all his notebooks, but he had them in his head. So with me, if you come out there and you start like 2 or 3 or 4 weeks before I even get there, you start talking about this superstar coming in. And, if it had been somebody like say Hulk Hogan, before he was Hulk Hogan,
Right.
but a guy that looked like Hulk Hogan coming in that was unknown, kind of an unknown person, you could say, well, you could give him that kind of build-up because he looks it. He looks it.
Yeah.
But I didn't look like anything special. Well, by having me come in and just another schlub or, Bill had done it. Some of the matches that I saw when I looked, I saw the same thing. He would some of the people I worked with, mid-card type guys, they bring in to put on you work against on TV, so you get a credible win. I mean, it wasn't just some guy you maybe looked like you pulled him out of the audience.
Right.
You would get somebody had some stature of some kind that you looked like you weren't just on there. Bless his heart, but in Atlanta, I worked with guys that were 160, 70 pounds several times. And
there was a lot of those type of guys there.
What was the name of the guy who started his own business too? Mike
Jackson?
Yeah, Mike Jackson. I worked with Mike. What does Mike weigh? 170 pounds?
If that.
Yeah, I worked with him on TV. I'm talking about on TV.
Yeah.
I worked with him on TV at least 4 or 5 times. If you do that once, fine. You can get away with it by being a bully, and you go to pin him and you don't. You pull him up, put the boots to him, slap him around, and embarrass him, and go to pin him again, pull him up, just make a real butthole out of yourself. You can get heat that way. But you can't do that 4 times in a row. And so when you look at it from like historians, like say our friends that were keeping these notes about what was going on TVs, in a year's time, you see me on 3 different matches with this Mike Jackson. But not to knock Matt, I'm not liking Mike, but to see me again, well, what's my problem? Why am I still wrestling someone of his caliber that I slaughtered the first time I wrestled him? Why am I back against him again? Logically, apparently I'm not doing that well, right? Bill was smarter than that.
No, it sounds like an excellent way to debut. It's not the common way to do it. And we've seen the old fan out of the audience type routine as well in certain territories. Nobody expected anything. They become a quote unquote pro wrestler overnight. But in this instance, you're just another regular Joe coming in, but apparently not. As you surprise everyone, you take home the Louisiana title, and we get rolling. The ball's rolling now. That's going to air by the beginning of August television, and you're on a roll. And we're going to look at some of the opponents that you take on early in your career here in the Mid-South Territory. We're going to take a look at some of the TV matches as well. But before we do that, do you have a Scott Irwin story you'd like to share?
Yeah, Scott was larger than life. He was a big guy physically, but he's a smart guy, a good guy. At that time in his life, he affected the motorcycle gang member type. He wasn't like a Hell's Angels. I don't know if he even had a club affiliation or anything, but he had a bike, and he had the black vest type look and the hat and the boots and all that, motorcycle boots.
Right.
And he hung around. He hung around with motorcycle guys. And I remember he had a bunch of guys at the Imperial Room in Tampa when we were working down there. They had a little place off to the side with maybe 4 tables where they kind of had pulled them off and separated them and pull a stanchion with a little rope on it out there, kind of make it like a private club.
Absolutely.
And nobody was going to go barge in there. But one thing I noticed was that most of the really pretty girls that came down there that were, groupies, if you want to call them that, fake fans.
Yeah, we'll be polite and just call them groupies.
Yeah, and really, Well, a lot of the girls ended up back there because
Okay.
those guys didn't try to, they didn't try to say, hey, can I buy you a drink? They say, hey, if you're interested, buy me a picture and maybe we'll let you join us. And some of them would go do it. Yeah. So I love that mentality because
It's the
you see,
temptation of it all, right?
well, I talked to one of the girls one time that was a college co-ed at Tampa. I just asked her, I saw you with a couple of guys, and you were. I met her through Scott, and later on, I don't know, 6 months or so later, I saw her somewhere else, and I asked her, I said, well, what was your attraction to the guys? And she said, well, I'm here in college. She said, I have all these college boys. They come up and they have like a line, flattery, and all this. They're trying to impress me, and it's so phony, and they expect me to. She said, I need to be phony too. I can't just say, well, openly, let's be honest and see if we like each other. You can't say that because there weren't any men around, any guys around there that weren't like motorcycle type guys or pro wrestlers that were would go for that. So she said, yeah, to have a guy just say, hey, if you're interested, come on over. If you aren't, get lost. She said, I kind of like that. She said it was honest. And she said, I didn't mean I was going to go do anything they wanted, but, I'd go over and see what the deal was. She said, frankly, I had a much better time. They treated me a lot better. I said, what do you mean? So I saw one guy spill a beer all over you. She said, yeah, but we were all laughing, weren't we? I said, yeah, that's true. She said, I had guys that I dated that just so unbelievably backwards about making any kind of move at all. Frankly, it was boring. So yeah, I think that's what that image presented to a lot of people was this is unconventional, and if you get with us, you can be unconventional too.
Okay. Very cool. So Scott Irwin, the party guy, hanging out at the bar, creating his own VIP room, if you will. That sounds like a good time.
Well, we were up in Ohio. This was in the 83, 84. Scott
Working
was working
for
up there.
Georgia,
Oh,
right?
yeah, for Georgia. And we were hanging on the road. We rode together because we always had a good time. And he had met a girl at the matches. She was a motorcycle affiliated too. And there was a bar that she went to that was like her bar. And so that evening or maybe it was after the matches, and Scott had made an arrangement that we're going to go to her bar and have some beers and all that. Well, if you know about a person's local bar, that's their bar with their friends and people in the community, and like maybe 99% of them aren't wrestling fans. They're not wrestling people.
Right.
Well, when we went to the bar, it was me and Scott. I think his brother Bill Irwin was with us. Scott walked in, and as soon as we got inside the door, we're 30, 40, 50 feet away from where the actual bar is, where most of the people are sitting. And he starts yelling. Her name was, Gloria or something. He says, Gloria, I'm looking for Gloria. We just walked in the door. And everybody turns and looks around. I don't know how thrilled Gloria was, but she was kind of, because he made her look like a star. Well, by doing that, I could have never done that in a million years unless it was, I talked about going in a bar, the gay bar out in San Francisco with Chris Colt, and being relieved to have two females with me as cover for me. If I wasn't going to walk in that bar and scream anything. Well, Scott walks in this completely strange bar, and I mean, there's 15, 20 guys there. It's not like, we're vastly outnumbered, let's put it this way. And probably most of these people know each other. It's late on a Saturday night, and they've been drinking for a while. So I just had, now there was some hostility there, but it was muted. It was understated because Scott was friendly and everything. I mean, he came in, he bellowed up to the bar, and Gloria I think she was thrilled to have him there because he made a star out of her, at least for that night. But that might seem like a small thing, but I was just impressed that he had the confidence. He wasn't a brute. He wasn't a guy who was looking for a fight. Not at all. Now, he could fight. I actually never saw him. He never had to. He was just looking to have a good time. He wanted to be kind of in charge, too, and for a reason. What are people that get offended if you come into their bar, they don't like the fact that you're getting attention from some of their girls at their bar? What are they going to say if they know you're a pro wrestler? They're going to start talking about wrestling some way or other. By Scott coming in the way he did, and being so loud and apparently fearless, not afraid of anything. And there should be nothing for him to be afraid of. But by appearing to be that way and being friendly, he might have bought a picture or something for people next to us. By doing that, he showed a lot of confidence. So there was no reason for people to knock him. If we'd have come in there being all quiet and all kind of off back to ourselves, we would have looked like we were afraid of him or antisocial, one of the two, or both. Maybe the fact that Scott was dying factored into that. Not that he was looking to get killed that night, but that he wasn't worried about risking the last 50 years of his life. He knew he only had a couple or 3 or 4 more years to go. So, but anyway, I was impressed with that attribute of his character, and plus he was fun. Being on the road, we talked about with Bundy, being on the road with the wrong people can be just a horrible, horrible experience. Being on the road with Scott, what happens is the miles just disappear. You're in the car having fun. Whoever's driving is the only one that really has to pay attention. The rest of you can kid and, have fun, joke and have fun, laugh and have a good time. And he was fun to be with. So, and I can't say that about everybody. I said it about Ray Candy because that was true with Ray. And plus Scott was a good worker too. He was a good hand.
Sure, absolutely. And that goes back even, further than this. Once upon a time, he worked up in New York as a Yukon Lumberjack, part of a tag team up there, the tag team champions. And boy, he was really young at that point, but man, he was even good then. Always a natural talent for a guy his size was Scott Irwin. But, I look around and we've got a lot to discuss here, and I see some stuff playing out on TV. It's going to be fun. But, before we really jump into the meat and potatoes, the guys you work with, the stories you're telling here, I wanted to touch base on another name that you absolutely worked alongside here. You can call him a tag team partner at times, because Cowboy Bill Watts really liked a format for his TV show. He would always have a special guest color commentator, an analyst, if you will, usually obviously a professional wrestler that can explain what's going on in the ring. And we've seen so many guys do this position. Ernie Ladd, Ted DiBiase, pretty much everyone got a shot at doing that color commentary role, including you, Bob, from time to time. Very articulate on the commentary, I should say. But I wanted to talk to you about the play-by-play man. I was going to ask you, do you have any memories of the flamboyant suit-wearing Boyd Pierce?
Yeah, Boyd was, he was flamboyant. Yeah, nothing really special comes to mind, but
I was just curious because you had done commentary alongside him, and I know you have a lot of stories with Gordon, but you were around Gordon a lot more. But I was just curious, like, if you recall how Boyd was to work with. Were you able to just go out there and do whatever you wanted? Did Boyd try to kind of control the situation?
No.
And he seems like a guy that, again, based on those flashy suits, even though he didn't come across like this in his television character, he seemed like a guy that probably liked to be noticed off screen anyway.
You know what? He was with me anyway. He was quiet.
Okay.
You don't have time you don't practice, of course. You don't rehearse.
Sure.
Well, you don't go out there 10 minutes before you're going to be on. You go out there, maybe you've just had a 2-minute break for a commercial break, and you're going to be out. You need to be out there when it's over. You didn't have time. Whatever color commentary I did with them, it started 10 seconds before the TV, within 30 seconds before the TV, before that session aired.
Okay.
And it ended as soon as it went out the air. I had to be back doing something else. Or if I was done for the day, I need to go home.
Would you
say...
say...
you stick around.
Based
he was
on,
busy.
Well, oh yeah, I would imagine so, but would you say, you always say, it must have been a good match because I don't remember it. Would you say that you don't remember a whole lot of commentary with Boyd because everything probably ran smoothly? Whereas maybe if you were working alongside Gordon in this situation, maybe you'd remember a few things.
Well, I listened to kind of a funny story. I listened to one of those tapes. I don't know where I saw it, but I listened to me doing commentary with Boyd.
Uh-huh.
This is, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I was not impressed, but I was pleased. I was happily pleased to see that I came across, I thought, as believable, made sense. I wasn't trying to sell a pig in a poke. If I couldn't make up some kind of a psychology for something, I'd call it a bad move, flub, or whatever. If something was obviously stupid looking or shoddy, I would try to call it or say nothing. But I just remember that I was impressed a little bit with my own shtick. By that time, my boys were, I'm not sure they were teenagers yet, but maybe, let's say 12 and 8 years old. And I brought them out to listen to it. I wanted them, and I was on TV too, doing it. And I wanted them to to listen to their dad waxing poetic on television. And they both lasted the oldest one lasted about, 20 seconds. He said, I got to go, Dad. I got a video game I got to play. My younger one said, well, Dad, yeah, I got to go find out what Ryan's doing. I have to laugh because I never could impress them too much. But I liked it. And Boyd was good to work with because nothing I did was even indirectly going to make him look bad. Some announcers I had, the guy out in Princess territory, he was good too, but he was very first made him nervous, so you had to be careful what you said around him, or he would stooge you off and come back and complain to the boss about it. But no, Boyd was good, and I'm sorry I don't have more, but I can't make it up.
No, that's totally cool. I was just curious, I just wanted to know how he was to work alongside. I didn't know if you'd have a lot of stories. I know a lot of the boys didn't really travel or hang around with a lot of the announcers and things. Everybody was doing different things. They're part of the business. So I totally get that. I was just curious, making sure Boyd wasn't a dick to you. That's basically what I was going at. Okay, very cool.
No. Mm-hmm. Now, you're talking about being close to the commentator. And we'll go back to Soley for a minute. Global Wrestling Alliance. Soley and I did like 25 shows.
Right.
With him, the announcer, and me, the color commentator.
Yeah.
We sat right next to each other at a table for the whole show. And between airtime, we didn't spend a second together. We despised each other.
Okay.
So as soon as we were off the air, I got up and went somewhere.
Everybody went their different way. I gotcha.
Well, we never stopped rolling with that particular setup because every time you stop, you've got 7 different machines going, to get everything taped. And if you stop taping, you have to go back and reset all the machines to the same new starting point. And it takes, 15 minutes. Well, when you're paying $500 an hour for studio time, $15 is $125. I mean, 15 minutes, $125. Mm-hmm. So, but the other thing was that we only had a 2-minute break, but sometimes the break might be longer. But I usually didn't sit there. I would get up, just stretch or whatever, go to talk to Red Roberts, the co-producer, mm-hmm. and we talk about what we might need to come up with or anything I felt like if we left out something. But, so what I'm using that example is that it depends on your relationship. If you're with somebody, say you're doing color commentary and you're being interviewed by a guy that you haven't seen for 5 or 6 years that you like. There was a ring announcer in Miami called Frank Freeman, and he was a ring announcer down there for a long time. And what a nice guy. He was always so nice to me when I started. He didn't treat me like a rookie. He was always very, very kind. And I've been gone for a year or two, and I came back. Or when I saw Frank, when I come out to the ring before my match and my opponent wasn't out there yet, Frank would come over. I tickle him to come over, and I chat with him, because he didn't come in the dressing room. But he'd come over, and I chat with him. Hey, how's it going, man? Good to see you. I'd be I was a heel. I was sticking my finger in his face like I was cussing him out. But I'd be talking to him like a friend
right.
would.
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah, well, it does. Calling the SOB. He asked him about his wife and kids. So there's ways to do it. But see, with him, I wanted to talk to Frank because I liked him. And as far as anybody out there got a problem with me not getting along with Gordon Soley, one of my big problems with Gordon Soley was that Gordon Soley despised me. I'm too lazy to go around despising people. But somebody who really hates me and will go way out of their way to show it, well, I got time for them. Just self-defense.
Well, we'll save Gordon for another day. I don't want to get too far off topic and start a Gordon rant right now. But I tell you what, before we move on, since you mentioned ring announcers, do you remember Reeser Bowden, who was the ring announcer for the TV here in the Mid-South?
let me look at a picture between shows.
Sure.
Next
Yeah,
week.
we can. Yeah, we'll see if if it jogs your memory before we come back on the next episode. Right now, we'll continue on with TV then, and we're going to get back into the action. The very first week, you debut, you wrestle the Super Destroyer, which Bill Watts was very well known for putting on quality matches. It wasn't just a bunch of squash matches like he got up in New York and various other territories. Lots of competitive matches on the Mid-South TV. And it continues to the following week. You defeat Super Destroyer for the belt, and the very next week you take on the Grappler, who is a former North American champion. And for those who don't know, that is the top title in the Mid-South territory. The Grappler here, Len Denton, under the mask, who is also part of the Frank Dusek family here. And it's Bob Roop over the Grappler on a disqualification when the Dusek stable runs in and attacks you. That includes, obviously, the Grappler already in the ring, but also Frank Dusek, who is I guess you could say, a semi-pro wrestler at the time because he was working as a manager and working matches at the same time. Super Destroyer comes out, as well as Kim Duck, also known as Tiger Chung Lee. So it's a 4-on-1 attack here on Bob Roop in your second week in the territory, as you've made an enemy of the entire stable now, stealing that Louisiana title. What the story goes on to the following week, August the 15th, and before anybody gives me crap, guys, these are Brian Ochman's TV dates because every city aired the show on different days of the week. Also, there was the old bicycle we talked about in the Amarillo territory. It's not exactly 5 weeks long here in the Mid-South, but the TV airs on different days in different cities. So anybody that's going to bitch at me and say, wait a minute, it didn't air on August 15th in Baton Rouge. Well, we're basing this off of the New Orleans TV dates. So the following week, after the DQ, after the attack from the Grappler and company, you have a rematch. And this week you go over by pinfall. So now you've defeated the Super Destroyer and the former North American champion, the Grappler, 3 weeks into your run here on TV, both by pinfall. But I love the story that Bill Watts is telling with you week to week to week here on television.
Well, I talked earlier about Bill being really smart. And what he was able to do, he did it with me. All these roles you're seeing, like what Scott Irwin and then the Grappler, eventually Paul Orndorff, we all did the same thing. We'd come in and get over. Now, I don't know if any of them started babyface like I did, but they come in and get over, whatever used to get them over. And then when they would do something on TV that was going to take away some of their heat, like Get Beat, for example, by Junkyard Dog, right in the middle of the ring, which I did when I was a top heel.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't leaving. I got beat right in the ring. Well, later on that show, I did something with somebody else where I ran in and helped beat up some poor guy. I had all my heat back when we went out the air, because getting beat by a Junkyard Dog, and, Watts was smart enough, and Dog was nice enough, he didn't have to beat me and eat me like Dusty did. He could just beat me, get a 1, 2, 3,
right,
and not satisfied. He didn't have to take every bit of heat I had out of the ring with him, and the heat vampire. So, but Bill would do something later in the show where you'd come back and you do something, and that gets the kind of heat. It's not cheap heat, but that sneaky kind of a backstabbing heat when you've been beat earlier in the show, and people have been so thrilled to see you get beat because you've been bragging and all that and being superior and acting superior and all that. They're so happy to see you get beat. But before you even have to come out and admit it, you get to do something horrible later in the show. And maybe you get to say something, you swing by the referee, by the announcer on the way after you splatter some guy's mother or something. You go by and say, well, how do you like them apples? Well, people forgot all about you getting beat by the Junkyard Dog. Or if they do remember it, they say, well, that beating wasn't enough. Look at Roop. He hasn't learned his lesson. He's still an a-hole. So Watts was good that way.
Yeah.
He could be top heels. He could be top baby faces on a show and remake them in the same show. Yeah, he was real good. You're
going to work the Super Destroyer, as you said, a whole lot. Now, in between, there's other guys, other opponents, the Grappler and things like that on the house shows here that I'm looking at. But it's a 3-week story arc for TV that really builds you up, gets you over, establishes you right out of the gate. 2 big, giant pinfall victories on television here. And then they can kind of settled down a little bit. The following week, August 22nd, you work a preliminary match. You go over on a young enhancement talent by the name of Jake Savage. And then the next week, they begin building up a new tag team, Bob Roop and Ted Dibiase, going to score the win August 29th over the team of Ken Mantell and Carl Fergie. And I was wondering if you have any Ken Mantell stories, any memories of Ken Mantell.
Yeah. He started, he came to Florida when I was a rookie down there.
He also, I think he worked under his real name too at one point, Ken Lusk, before he was Ken Mantell.
Same guy. That's the guy. Yeah. He came to Florida as Ken Lusk. We were working out in the gym, at Harry Smith's gym, 3 or 4 of us, and he was one of us. And he hadn't done a lot of weightlifting. So that's the working out I'm talking about. We were in a gym working out with weights. This is a terrible story, but I got to tell it. It's the only one I can remember really about him.
Okay.
We had done bench presses, and we started with a weight of, I don't know, say 200 pounds. And then we would put it up to 225, 250, whatever. And then we put up 275. Well, he came in at 275, and he hadn't warmed up. But because he was late, he wanted to get right into the action, you know. He didn't want to go off by his own. And we told him, hey, you better warm up. He said, oh, no. He said, I don't need to warm up. He did 1 rep, tore a pec muscle. He was out for, wow. I mean, he was hurting for, he didn't totally rip the whole thing loose, but he couldn't work out for 3 or 4 months. That's why he was a good guy, decent worker. He went on to be junior world champion for a number of years.
He went over on Danny Hodge there in the mid-70s. Yeah. So,
he was a good guy, family man. We had a strong wife who was like a good manager for him, whether he wanted to be managed or not. It seemed to be working okay. And
that's funny you said that, because maybe he picked up a lot from his wife, because he would go on to get a lot of credit as one of the top bookers of the 1980s. He booked Fritz von Erich during the prominence during that era of the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. He also went on to book for Bill Watts there in the UWF during that big peak there at around 1986 or so. So yeah, Ken Mantell had a lot of pull backstage throughout the 1980s and some of the territories that were still around going into obviously the end of the territory era. But I was just curious because I saw his name here. He just kind of pops up in this tag team match with Carl Fergie, who I'm not sure if you know that name off the top of your head. Fergie got around. He was there. He was around the business for quite a while. Became a referee for Watts later on as well.
Well, the guys I remember is because we spent some personal time together.
Right.
If I had any kind of personal time at all, because where are you going to have experiences? You're not going to have them probably at the wrestling arena. You're in the dressing room. What's going to happen?
Well, maybe if somebody puts lighter fluid in your asthma inhaler or something, that's possible. But yeah, other than that, I get what you're saying.
Or if somebody goes out and takes a dump in the ring, and then in your match with you, and then as you come back in the dressing room, they say, good match, wasn't it? Yeah, you pick up a chair, throw it against the wall. Yeah, maybe something like that could happen in the dressing room, but it doesn't happen that often, thank God.
Sure.
Yeah. But Ken was a good guy, and I expected him to do well. That he managed to keep his family together. I lost after he left Florida. I lost track of him. Even though I worked up there with him, we didn't get together for 10 seconds.
I got you.
I don't think there was even time to do any catching up.
Right. So the story here, though, is Bob Roop finds himself a tag team partner, a guy by the name, everybody knows this one, of Ted Dibiase, who went on to become a legendary figure in the history of professional wrestling. Of course, everybody knows him as the $1 Million Man working for Vince McMahon in the WWF. But Ted Dibiase had a hell of a run in Amarillo, a true hell of a run here for basically most of the 80s up until he goes over to Vince here working for Bill Watts here. He also did a stint or two in Georgia, as I'm sure you'll recall. Tell me a little bit. I know you talked about that story when you guys rode up and down the road with King Kong Bundy, you and Teddy. But do you have any any thoughts, opinions, any memories, any stories of Ted Dibiase?
Yeah, Ted was a good stand-up guy. He was a good guy, smart guy. He grew up in the business, which can be hard. You're as a young man, if your father's a really top respected wrestler like his dad was, and then you lose his dad at an early age, it's got to be hard on you. But Ted he was class person. One of the things I always remember, and I potated him busted his chin open. I think it was with a high knee, but I think it might have been.
I've seen your high knees. I didn't see the match, but I'm going to go along and say it probably was that high knee of yours, by the way.
Well, I know I got Jake the Snake with the high knee. He came up after the match, Jake, and I said, "Hey, thanks for the match." He said, "Yeah." He lifted his chin, he smiled, big smile on his face, his chin right under his. So he's got a little pouch chin right at the back of it. There was like an inch long, not a gash. The skin got popped open, but could have used a stitch. But you could in those days you could just use a butterfly. I think that's what he did. And I got Ted. I think I kicked him. He was leaning on the apron, and I was standing on the apron. He was leaning there selling. And I went down to kick him. I was going to put a flat boot to the side of his head, which, was not going to hurt him.
Right.
And he turned into it. And I was on the upswing, and my boot caught him, I think, maybe at the bottom of the chin. I don't know if he needs stitches or not, but, I always told him, I said, "You moved." Well, because I kicked him, that's always the excuse. When somebody says, "Hey, you potatoed the shit out of me." No, I didn't. You moved. Christ, I almost hurt my foot, man. Don't be moving like that. What are you, crazy? So, but he did move. Sorry, Ted. It's my story. I'll tell it any way I want to.
Nice.
So, but Ted was fun. He had good stories, and he was upbeat. He was one of the guys I was happy to bring home with me to my mother's house in Lansing after my dad had passed away, and spent a night with us. And, I was happy for my mom to meet people like that were in the business with me. People like him, like Ray Candy, and people like that, guys of character that my mom could meet with, and the Road Warriors. I mean, those guys were gentlemen at my mom's house.
Wow, I can't imagine taking Hawk and Animal home to meet Mom.
Oh, God. Oh, man. We had breakfast together, Hawk, Animal, Mom, me, and
how many eggs did Mom have to cook for that meal?
She cooked up a bunch, but so Mom's trying to be sweet mama. She brings out a scrapbook, so she's showing these guys my baby pictures, and they're putting her over like, "Oh, this is Roop. That's so nice." And as soon as she's looking, she'd look over Hawk, Animal would look at me and give me a big smirk like, "You're an ugly little baby." And they were making fun of me. My family, including my parents, always called me Nick. My name is Robert Michael Roop. Instead of calling me Bob, they called me a derivative of Michael, which was Nicky. And then as I got older, they changed it to Nick, just Nick, Nick Roop. That was my name until we moved right before 7th grade, would have been in the mid-50s. And we came up to here to Lansing to live. And I felt like the name Nick, I saw a Sports Illustrated article that had Mickey Wright was a golfer that had her. And I thought, well, Mickey, that's a girl's name. So I introduced myself in this new community as Bob Roop. And to this day, I'm sorry I did it because, there's Bobs, 15 Bobs in this block alone. There's probably no Micks here.
Right.
But anyway, they found out my name was Mick. And the other thing they found out, my mother let it know, which was news to me too, was that I wasn't planned. I was a baby that came. The stork showed up. Just
what a conversation to find out, while she's hanging out with the Road Warriors. Unbelievable.
Guess what they called me after that for the next year or two? Mick Steak.
Well, that's a new one. That's a good story to put out there.
There's Mick Steak.
Well.
Well, sorry, we got to divert it again, but
that's all right. Well, I'm sure everybody enjoys a Hawk and Animal story. I'm just trying to picture Mom cooking up all the eggs and everything like that, and then showing the scrapbook. Unbelievable, but that's okay. We'll get back to the roadies over and over here on the show, no doubt about that. But right now, we'll go back to the Mid-South territory here in 1981. We talked about you teaming up now with Ted Dibiase. You guys are starting to get your stuff together as a team, maybe looking to go after those tag team titles. We'll see in just a moment. Speaking of the tag team titles, in between working with Dibiase, you're thrown in the ring with another tag team partner, a guy by the name of the Junkyard Dog. and you guys go into battle against the tag team champions on TV. You go to a TV time limit draw against Afa and Sika, the the Samoan Warriors, they were called here in the Mid-South territory. Sika, for those who don't know, the father of Roman Reigns here in the WWE in today's world. But back then, those Samoans roamed the earth, Afa and Sika. You got any stories about one or both?
I just had a reflection that was still in my mind about what Bill Watts was doing by having quality people like Ted DiBiase, Paul Orndorff, Afa and Sika, Grappler, and heels, and myself, and experienced heels like that, and having Afa and Sika with Ernie as your tag team heels, was that his prize stud, the cow bringing home all the money, was Junkyard Dog.
Oh yeah,
and Dog was not a great worker. He was inexperienced at that time. He looked great. His interviews sold millions of dollars for
oh my God, yeah.
But it was totally believable. But his ring work was C plus. And he still didn't want him to do too much. He didn't. Yeah. You didn't need a match more than 5
I believe I heard this story once upon a time, and Bill had a great relationship with Ernie Ladd, but he could fire him on the dime and rehire him, and I think it was Ernie who brought the dog in and stuck him into like a 20-30 minute match and basically exposed Dog one night, and Bill calls up Ernie Ladd and fires it. What the hell are you doing with my talent? Dog shouldn't be going more than 6 or 7 minutes, Ernie. I don't know that Ladd actually left the territory, but for that night, Ernie Ladd learned his lesson. You don't overwork the dog.
Yeah, it would be like having Doe and Dagmar put a head scissors on Andre the Giant and hold him in the middle of the ring for about 20 minutes. You don't do that. You don't do that with people like you're trying to make the superstars.
Right.
You can't. Yeah, you can't. Overexposure is just that.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project, includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come. Did you have any experience hanging out with Afa and Sika, or did you ever see them do anything crazy? Any kind of stories about the Samoans?
No, they were pretty mild. They were pretty mild
Okay.
Back there. And I didn't. I spent a lot of time riding by myself. I lived in Alexandria. A lot of the guys lived in Baton Rouge. Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of the guys lived in Baton Rouge, which was between Shreveport and New Orleans. And
Okay.
But Alexandria, my wife was going to go to a nursing school there, so I didn't. I drove a lot of trips by myself. I had a little foreign car, Datsun, 50 miles a gallon, so I was fine. I was fine traveling by myself. I was also coming off a year of being opposition and then being with the Poffos in their little outlaw group.
Yeah.
Not that nobody treated me in any way ostracized or anything. But, I said it in one of the former shows, I had lost a lot of my respect for the group of the boys as a body, as a group, because of the way that they acted when we went opposition. Guys would be afraid to even talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I had, it broke my heart. It hurt me, but, you can't help but kind of remember that because it happened twice. Remember that, okay, we're all friendly and everything when things are going good, and you're also towing the mark like everybody else. But if you decide you want to go and do something different, maybe these guys won't be so friendly. And it didn't. I wasn't antisocial. I'm looking back on it, maybe just realizing that was my mindset now. That I'm realizing it now that was my mindset then, because I didn't have a problem traveling by myself. And you could leave anytime. You could leave early. I got used to being by myself after the opposition thing.
So would you say working with Afa, because I'm trying to get through some of these heels here, because you're going to make the heel turn shortly, and we're not going to be able to talk about these guys as much. So I'm just curious, would you say, like, when you worked with them, were they a night off, or were they a little too snug for your taste?
I think whatever they were, it was fine, because I don't remember it.
Okay.
They were good. They were fine. And, unlike some of their younger relatives, friends, or, the guys that followed them,
Mm-hmm.
these guys were seasoned by this time, especially Sika, but both of them. And they were friendly.
I didn't mean like they were taking liberties or anything like that. Just some guys happen to work more snug than others. And I was just kind of curious because obviously based on their gimmick, but they were pretty basic in the ring. And, you never hear a whole lot about them causing too much trouble. So I was just curious in that regard, because again, you're about to make the heel turn. You're going to be on the same side as the Samoans. So I don't know that they're going to pop up a whole lot as we continue on. So I just wanted to get that in there. Obviously, you already pointed out too, they were managed at this time by Big Cat Ernie Ladd. So you're back in another territory with Ernie Ladd, who we've talked about quite a bit. But I also noticed another name that pops up here just a month after you do, and he seems to follow you everywhere you go, and that's the Cowboy, Bob Orton. Orton Jr., I mean. So you guys, you leave Knoxville together, or you leave Fuller together. You guys go, you work over an All-Star. You work for Poffo. You're feuding back and forth with the TV title here earlier in 1981 for Angelo Poffo's ICW. And now here, just a month after you arrive, here comes Bob Orton. Now, do you recall, did you have anything to do with this? How tight were you with Bob Orton at this point in time? Were you guys pretty close? Because you guys worked a whole lot together. And now I see Bob Orton follows you over, and you guys were both quote-unquote blackballed not long before this. So it just seems a little odd that you both show up right around the same time.
Are you sure he came after me?
He came right around the same time as you. The first time he pops up in my results is about a month after you, but I'm only looking at your results right now. So it's very well possible he came in before this, but I do know you guys were both working for Poffo at least through June.
Yeah.
And so
well, that's not critical. Bobby, in order to get there, it seemed to me I loaned him the money. I loaned him $1,500 to get there, to get him and his wife and a new baby, to get him to.
Was that baby named Randy by chance?
Yeah, get Randy. Okay. Yeah, I held Randy when he was a day or two old. Yeah, Bobby needed. That was one thing. We were paying our salary that we were earning. We were paying for our stock in the company with it. We were living on $400 a week, which included paying for your gas and your food. So we were broke all the time and never making any money. And Bobby, I don't think, could live on $400 a week, so he might have been borrowing against his. So when it came time to leave, he didn't have traveling money. So I was glad to loan it to him.
I did a little extra digging here. It looks like Bob pops up just 2 weeks after you, so he arrives right after you do.
Okay. Well, maybe I did get out of there first. I'm not sure why, but we'd been a great tag team.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the matches we had were really, really good. Bobby was one of the best technical hands in the ring. Some of the things he could do were just marvelous. His hand-eye coordination, all that. Outside the ring, he was a mess, but inside the ring, he was a genius and just brilliant. Watching him was a pleasure. Tag teaming with him was great too. We had good runs, and we seemed to get along okay. A lot of pot being smoked in the car, beer every night.
That's right, Daddy.
Yeah. So, and that's fine. That was par for the course. I was doing it too, so I'm not.
No, yeah. Well, when you said that, I figured.
Well, I put it to you this way, though. Not that I didn't buy marijuana myself, but
right.
If I wasn't on a show with Bobby, if I was by myself, I wouldn't always smoke.
Right, I got you.
A lot of times I was doing it with him,
Yeah, I got you.
Kind of keep the mood. Now, he started out as a baby face or as a heel?
Bobby comes in as a heel right out of the gate. You'll be joining his side here soon.
I'm starting out as a baby face.
Right. Yeah, I got you in a match here in Baton Rouge, September 1st. Listen to this trio of Bob Roop, the Junkyard Dog, and Ted Dibiase. They're putting you in there with the heavy hitters right away, taking on Bob Orton and the Wild Samoans. You guys go over there in Baton Rouge, September the 1st. So that's where Bob Orton's name came up for the first time for me. But he actually starts at the beginning of August. He comes in 2 weeks after you. So you guys come in just about the same time. So Angelo Poffo losing some of his very top talent there. Of course, he's going to keep Randy Savage, but that's for obvious reasons.
Well, he kept Ronnie, too.
Yeah.
So I pulled Ronnie out of there a year or two later.
Did you? Yeah, for Georgia. That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at this, too, and I only see the name pop up once, and I got to ask you, did you have any encounters, any memories of the Great Kabuki? Because I see September 5th in Alexandria, Louisiana, Bob Roop, Ted DiBiase, and the Junkyard Dog taking on the Samoans and the Great Kabuki. So I got to ask you, any memories of working with or being around Kabuki, the gimmick?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember anything special. See, what we're talking about, a lot of the guys, what you saw on TV was a lot more interesting and dynamic and thrilling and all that than what you saw in public. I think the guy who was Kabuki was a quiet individual in private.
That's my understanding. Takachiyo, who was basically mid-card at best, a lot of time he's been used as enhancement talent. Gary Hart looks at him and goes, "Ma Kabuki," and he just gives him this gimmick, and the gimmick gets over, right? But before that, he was just, Just another guy on the card.
Oh, it's a great gimmick. Yeah. The guys that
He got the green mist, right? The green mist, man. That was the big deal.
Well, he was a good talent. He got all kinds of racism in this country. The Germans and the Japanese from World War II kept it going for
a little too long here.
Yeah, several decades. Well, the Korean War helped, even though Korea and Japan are completely different. A lot of Americans think they're all Orientals, so it's all the same.
Right.
They're all yellow skin. So, and that's not meant as a slur.
No.
The Olympic rings have yellow as a color, and that's for the yellow races that have yellow skins. Red for the races that have red skins. Black, of course, and brown, white, and so anyway.
I might sound ignorant, but I never realized that's what the rings were representing. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll trust you. I mean, you did compete in the Olympics, so you know a little bit more than I do.
Well, yeah, they represent the ethnic makeup of the.
Okay, and I never knew that. I guess a lot of people out there pretending like they knew that right now, calling me an idiot, but that's okay.
I want to ask those people who are still knocking me for trying to take Roy Scheider's territory. What about the hostile takeover that all the Europeans in this country did against the Native Americans, where they took the whole country from them? How about that one? Does it have any? In fact, nobody in Scheider's family died from anything I did. About 3/4 to 9/10 of the Native Americans perished as a result of the hostile takeover toward them. So
somewhere right now, somebody's typing up a question. They're going to ask me on Facebook, was there a Roop on that first boat that came over here? I can see it coming right now, but that's all right. We'll deal with that in time. Now we'll go back to the TV if that's okay with you. We'll kind of look at because we're getting down to the good stuff here. We're getting very close, and I got some great detail here from Brian Achman on the heel turn, and I want to get to that on this first episode. So September 5th, you work a match with the Junkyard Dog against the Samoans. Goes to some kind of a time limit draw or something like that. The following week, you don't wrestle. You work as the guest commentator for the first time alongside Boyd Pierce. Then you return September 19th, where you team once again with Ted DiBiase in a squash match over Jake Savage and Tugboat Taylor. And the action continues on as we move on. Oh, here it comes. September 26th television, at least in the New Orleans play date. Here's where Brian Achman, he's going to give us some detail. And this is fun. He says, Bob Roop and Ted DiBiase have a TV tag title match against the Samoan Warriors, Afa and Sika, managed by Ernie Ladd. Now, near the end of the matchup, Bob Roop had Afa up for his shoulder breaker, and at the same time, Ernie Ladd jumped up onto the apron. Ted DiBiase, meanwhile, disposed of Sika and pulled Ladd into the ring, starting to beat on the Big Cat. Now, Ernie Ladd was the manager, for those who don't know. So you deliver your shoulder breaker on Afa, and you go for the pin, but the referee calls for the bell. Bob Roop raises his hand. He jumps up. He thinks you guys have just won the tag team titles. But the referee said that the Samoans were disqualified because Ernie Ladd came into the ring. And then Ted DiBiase has to tell you, well, your back was turned. You didn't realize what had happened, that he actually pulled Ladd into the ring. So you're livid post-match. You can't believe it. Ted DiBiase just cost you the tag team titles. And then you go into a commercial break yelling at DiBiase, but when you come back, cooler heads have prevailed. Bill Watts explains to everyone what just went down in the ring, and I guess for now, everything's okay. Everything's copacetic, but this is phase one of the issues between you and your tag team partner, Ted DiBiase.
Yeah, I remember specifically asking him 12 or 15 times before the match, please don't bring Ernie. I don't remember saying anything like that. Well, it sounds good. Real subtle. I said you could do the one where, Ted's holding Ernie, and I go to punch Ernie, and he ducks, and I hit Ted, and Ted throws Ernie out and stares into me. Some real stupid thing like that. But, no, that's a good one. Just set the stage.
That's right. So that's kind of, I'll call it phase one here because the next episode, it gets a lot more fun. But, before we get to the next episode of TV, there's some matches in between on the house shows. You do some teaming with Jimmy Garvin. We told a fun story about Jim. I don't know if you have another one this week or not. I'll let you decide. But I noticed you work a week straight, 7 days in a row against Tony Charles, who was just an amazing wrestler out of England. And I was wondering if you have any stories or any memories or just want to put over Tony Charles here for the listeners.
Oh, just, one of the best guys, I've met in the business. Just a real, sweetheart, a good person, good family man. His wife was wonderful, his children. Tony, if he'd have been 4 inches taller, and he could have been NWA champion. But, just under, and I don't know if he wanted to be. He seemed to be, whatever he was doing, he seemed to be happy at. And I know he could always go back to England and work on top, and maybe other places too. Just a top guy. At one time, he stood up for me. The Tampa cops were trying to run a drug bust on me. They thought I was selling marijuana, and I wasn't, by the way. That's just what they thought. And it came from this. What would happen is, well, you couldn't, and we'd be at the Imperial Room. If you're going to smoke, you had to go out in your vehicle. Well, I had a van, and you talk about a van. It was like a tie-dyed van. It had all these unbelievable colors on it, and it stood out. 50 cars or vans there. This one really stood out. A
hippie van. I wonder what's going on in there. Right? Yeah.
Oh, well, what the cops started watching the place. Somebody got the idea that they were going to try to bust a wrestler, and what they would see me come out and get in the van, would not have somebody, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people with me, and because you couldn't smoke in a club. You couldn't smoke pot in the club.
Right.
So we'd go out in the van, and what I'd do, because my van fit us all. Nobody had vans back then. The wrestlers all had cars, but I had this van. So in the van they had 2 nice big captain's chairs in the back, and then the 2 of the seats in the front turned around. Because cops would come through, a cop car would come through the lot every so often, rather than sit out there and smoke, what I do is we'd go for a drive. We'd go out and drive around the neighborhood, go up and down blocks with the windows down so that you could get the pot smell out of the van, and we'd smoke a joint. And I'd come back, park, go back in. Well, maybe I might do that maybe once or twice a night, and maybe do it 2 or 3 weeks in a row. What the cops thought was happening was that I was selling pot, and I was bringing these people out to, try the pot, and then I was selling them some.
Mm-hmm.
They got Tony for something, disturbing the peace or something. He was saying goodbye to somebody, less certain maybe, and they were yelling back and forth, "Hey, boy, oh, yeah." And it was about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, so the cops rousted him, and they started looking for it. And they got him down because he came to me. They tried to get him to confess that I was stoned. So Tony and I got along. I'd gone to his apartment a few times, which his apartment was right across the street from the Imperial Room. That's where the story ties in.
Okay.
So they seen me go to his apartment a few times. Not when I was there, but at different times. They run after Tony and tried to get him to sue me off for selling pot, and he wouldn't do it. Well, he couldn't because he didn't even know.
But it was basically, hey, we'll let you go if you give us this guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, he's on a green card here, so that he would risk that and not just go along with him.
Right.
He was character. He was class. He came and told me about it right away. Warned me. He said, "Well, I don't know what you're doing, Bob. I don't care, but we're looking at you, so be careful."
Oh, that was cool.
I looked at that. Yeah. Well, I thought about that. Well, now you did have to be careful, but you know what? I never had a bag of pot in my van. If I had any, it would be like maybe 1 joint, and I had some place where I could eat it in a second. Just throw it down the pipes because I didn't want to. When I first started, it was still a felony, so you had to be real careful.
The silliness of it all.
Oh God. Yeah, you could go out and get smashed and run your tree in the car and kill somebody, and you get less jail time than you got caught. Well, I tell you, out in Texas, 1 week in the newspaper in Odessa, a guy got caught. He caught his wife with another guy. He took an axe. He murdered the guy and his wife. He got 50 years in prison. A couple of weeks later, a guy got caught going through there with 100 pounds of pot. He got 55 years in prison.
Wow.
So you can axe murder your wife.
I guess.
Her boyfriend.
At least in Texas. But that goes along with Texas. No offense to the Texans out there. But
yeah, actually, if you catch somebody with your wife, you murder them, they think you should get a medal. You should get a gold star. What do you mean go to jail? So, but anyway, yeah.
Maybe in the Badlands.
They were ridiculous with their attitude. Now it's medicinal, Or we've had some interesting rules in this country, but that's neither here nor there. So where are we going now?
Well, we'll go right back to the TV here in a second. I just wanted to ask one last question in regards to Tony Charles. Now, he was smaller than Billy Robinson, but would you say he was equally as capable, just maybe didn't have that nasty streak about him?
I think Tony could have beat Billy.
Okay, you give the nod to Tony? I know Tony was smaller, but I was just curious. Okay.
Well, first of all, I saw the best match I ever saw Billy Robinson have was with Tony Charles. I might have mentioned it before.
Right,
but
I remember that.
Poetry in motion for 8 minutes.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine.
I never thought Billy Robinson had any talent until I saw that match.
Really?
But,
okay.
No, I worked with him a couple times. I was going to say it earlier in this program. The only guy that ever got stiff me in the ring was Billy Robinson.
Okay.
And he didn't do it. I didn't do anything about it. I got out of the hold immediately, and he never got a hold of me again. I wasn't going to shoe with him.
Okay.
I was working in the office. I just went back, and Louis Gillette had booked that town. I just went back, told Louis, said, don't ever book me with him again.
Okay. I mean, hey, I totally get it, man. It's not what's going on. I mean, you can't trust. You're supposed to be able to go out there and give your body to your opponent. And, by all accounts, Billy Robinson was just, I don't know what that was, that whole Wigan thing or what the deal was. You hear, similar things with the Dynamite Kid and some of those other guys. I don't know what drove them to be the type of people that they were. But, yeah, Billy Robinson, lots of stories out there about him. So I totally get it.
Let me encapsulate it and try to do it in short and sweet. It got over with Vern Gagne, who was Billy's main source of income in this country. Mm-hmm. But running his school up there and being hard on people, humiliating rookies and all this, that was, and Vern approved of that. Vern liked that. I disagree completely myself, but Vern liked that. And so Billy, that got over up there. Well, when he got to other places and tried to do that, it wasn't quite so so acceptable. And even up there,
I can't imagine what the people of Memphis thought when he came through there.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, Ray Stevens told me, and we weren't knocking Billy. I don't know how it came up, but it came up, and Ray said, "Yeah." He said he's stepping up with me one time. He said after the match, I went to him. I said, "Look," Ray's talking to Billy Robinson. He said, "Look, Robinson." He said, "I worked 73 days here last year, made $103,000. Mm-hmm. If you want to work with me, you better loosen up, because if you get stiff on me again, I'll never work with you again." He walked off.
Well, it's a lesson learned, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I could have gone to Louis and said, "Louis, I worked 378 shows here last year. I made about $20,000. So I just told Louis not to book me with again. Right. The last thing I'm going to do is, see, I was fighting against that kind of reputation, because if you convince people you're tough and that you will do that in the ring, they're worried about when they get in the ring with you. Mm-hmm. What happens if they potato you? You were the one that moved, and they kicked you right in the mouth. They have to worry about you. Like, God, are you going to break my leg? So, yeah, you got to make sure. For guys like me, you had to be sure that you never showed that side. That was the main reason I quit shooting with marks. People from outside the...
they bring it from the audience and whatnot.
Yeah, because the boys were watching that too. And they were seeing me hurt these people or make them quit or putting them out. Imagine me taking a pro wrestler in the ring. The bell rings, I take him down, put the sugar on him, and 15 seconds in the match, he's unconscious. Say I do that to Dusty Rhodes. Well,
yeah, I think that would get you blackballed quicker than trying to run opposition in Knoxville. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, Carl Gotch, poor Carl, here's another thing. Carl Gotch had, this guy looked 50 times more athletic than I did. And he could do 900 squats a day and 1,500 push-ups. And, the guy was a monster. He made a fortune in Japan having guys do push-ups and squats. But because he was known to be a hooker, he couldn't get work in this country.
Yeah, no.
And I broke in. I heard about this guy, Carl Gotch, who was this great shooter, hooker, and all this. And he had a job. His last job had been collecting garbage in Hawaii or someplace. That was the only job he could get. So I said, well, I didn't graduate from college and get into pro wrestling so I could go and run behind a garbage truck.
To his credit, he's still known to this day as the god of wrestling in Japan. He does have that legacy out there. I know Carl Gotch. Yeah, he was not somebody to fool around with, which, as you said, is probably the reason why we didn't see a whole lot of him here in the U.S. Throughout the 70s and so on. But Bob, I want to get in this big episode here of TV before we close out this week. We got to get into that heel turn. So we touched on it already last week. There was a little issue there, a little misunderstanding between you and Dibiase. You thought you had the titles in your hand. Dibiase yanking Ernie Ladd into the ring, causing the disqualification. The manager basically, quote unquote, interfering. Teddy says, "I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to." And you say, all right. And we fast forward the following week, October 3rd on New Orleans TV. Bob Roop is scheduled to defend his Louisiana title against the Great Kabuki, managed by Gary Hart. And now near the end of the match, and Brian Ockman writes this down. He broke this down for us, Bob, so I love this here, the detail. He says, near the end of the match, Gary Hart interferes and tries to hit Roop with a chair. As Ted DiBiase comes running to ringside to aid his partner Bob Roop, he hits Hart, who drops the chair in the ring and rolls outside. So I guess the referee took a bump here. As Kabuki then going to hit DiBiase with a savate kick, laying out Teddy. Kabuki then goes for Bob Roop, but Roop picks him up for the shoulder breaker. But as you scoop him up for the shoulder breaker, you trip backwards over the prone Ted DiBiase's carcass, laying in the middle of the ring. So when you fall backwards, your head lands on the chair that Gary Hart dropped. And so Kabuki lands on top of you. The referee comes to and makes the 1, 2, 3. Kabuki has just won, just defeated you for the Louisiana title. And Brian says, excellent booking, and it required great timing by everyone involved, and also the ring placement of everyone involved, all 4 or 5 of you at the right spot at the right time. So Gary Hart comes in with the chair. DiBiase intercepts, lays out Gary Hart. The chair falls. You scoop up Kabuki. You trip over DiBiase, who was laid out by Kabuki, and then you land head first, back of your head, on the chair. Kabuki steals the win and the title. We know what's coming next, but what do you think just about what the fan here, Brian Ockman, said about just everybody? Excellent placement in the ring for this spot to go down properly.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I'm visualizing it as, and I don't know if it's like a memory. I'm trying to get the memory to come to this visualization I'm making, but I can see what you're talking about. I can see all the action. And by a little aside here for everybody out there, we don't get time to practice these things.
Right.
We didn't practice that. But still, you don't have time to run through it like a ballet dancer.
Right. No practice.
Swan Lake. So, yeah, and that's just brilliant stuff. I really like that kind of stuff.
Very intricate booking here. It wasn't just somebody interfered and then we go to the finish. There are so many moving parts to this story, and I love that he broke this down in his notes, in his memories. He visualized this and wrote it out for us here for the show. And, this footage, to my knowledge, does not exist. So to get this in this detail, it plays into what's about to happen next, but it also plays into the finish. We know how Kabuki defeated you for the belt. And obviously, we know there's more to this story here in just a moment.
Wow, that's so valuable to have. The video is one thing, but written notes are just as incredible. Yeah, that's wonderful stuff to have. I'm really pleased to hear that. Being involved in something that you can't see through it. We weren't stumbling around to find our spots.
Right.
Apparently, it sounds like everybody was on cue, and it wasn't real obvious. It wasn't where you could see through it if you took a minute. Or someone who is an analytic thinker could say, oh, well, yeah, I see what they're doing. There's no way to see through that. There's
just too much stuff going on, and it's like, okay, what do we do with this guy? Okay, what do we do with that guy? And by the end, everything makes sense, and it's a perfect full circle, which leads to you losing the Louisiana title. So last week, Dibiase inadvertently causing both of you the tag team titles. This week, once again, involved in costing you your Louisiana title. And it's noted that post-match, Bob Roop goes nuts after realizing that it was his own partner, Ted Dibiase, who cost him 2 titles in 2 weeks. And this time, well, you guys don't make amends. This time, Bob Roop attacks Dibiase and delivers a beatdown, leading into a commercial break. And then it's noted later in the show, Bill Watts pulls you aside on TV here, tries to reason with you, explain to you that it was all a mistake. It was all an accident. Ted Dibiase didn't intend to cost you that Louisiana belt, but you were having none of it. And that leads to Jimmy Garvin, another friend of yours, coming out to have a word with you, man to man, face to face. And he comes out here and he too tries to explain to you, Bob, let's go backstage. Let's talk this over with Teddy. Let's all, set the record straight. Everybody shake hands and let's walk out of here, everybody friends once more. And that's when Garvin begins to turn around and lead you away. But you don't walk away with Jimmy Garvin. Instead, you double down on your heel turn by attacking Jimmy Garvin here at the interview area, laying him out as well. So Bob Roop turns heel, and I mean, they really get you over here. Not only do you turn on Ted DiBiase, but then later in the program, you turn on Jimmy Garvin as well.
Wow. I'm mad at me. I'm mad at me too.
What a heel.
What a jerk. Oh, yeah. That's some good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they set the stage. You kind of, okay, you let bygones be bygones last week. Accidents happen, but damn, I wanted those tag belts. This week, you owned that Louisiana title, and you lose it here, and you lose your cool. And wow, yeah, just what a story. And then later in the show, Bill Watts trying to talk sense into you, Jimmy Garvin trying to talk sense into you. You don't want to hear it, and you lay out another baby face to seal the deal. Absolutely a heel now is Bob Roop here in the Mid-South territory.
Yeah, that's again, that's good stuff. I've had enough. I mean, you guys.
Well, this is where things get good, right? Now you play the natural heel role here, as you're going to work your way into that main event, working with Dibiase, the North American title, Paul Orndorff, and so much to come here moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking of something else too. As a babyface, I had to be friendly to people, so that's why I kept to myself. I wasn't comfortable coming out of character at this stage in my career. With a personal friend, of course, but with people I didn't know, I didn't want to introduce myself as Bob Roop, the non-wrestler, because I didn't know people, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. The way to avoid now as a heel, but I didn't have to. People didn't want to meet me or have anything to do with me, and you're much more comfortable that way. I've always been a private person. I still am. I don't mind that. I didn't mind that at all. And people say, well, how could you wrestle in up to 250,000 people if you're a private person? Well, I'm not wrestling in my own living room with those people.
Right.
They're the audience. I'm by myself in the ring with 1 or 2 other people, or maybe 4. But, it's a private deal here. The rest of you are all on the other side of those ropes there. So it doesn't matter how many there are. I've kind of got my privacy in here. That was kind of my attitude. Well, don't get me wrong.
That was kind of your attitude here as a character, too, because you tell Jimmy Garvin, hey, don't stick your nose in where it doesn't belong. Mind your own business. I'm a private person. Let me, decide what I'm going to decide on my own.
I don't want to talk to Ted DiBiase stooge, unless it's maybe Bill Watts.
Now, I would have popped if Brian had listed here in this memory of his that Bob replied to Jimmy Garvin, I just want you to remember that time with the orange and the butcher knife. Because then I would have popped huge if that had been said on television. Oh yeah. Man, that would have been good.
That's a good thing you didn't come out here and try this before I came up with that butcher knife. Precious would be less one husband.
Oh man.
But, oh yeah. Oh man.
That's a good one.
Did I ever tell you that Bill Watts did a job for me in Tampa?
No, the Cowboy, huh?
Yeah, he was leaving. Yeah, he did a shoulder breaker on TV.
Wow. Okay.
He was leaving as a booker. Yeah, he's a good guy. I always respected Bill. Now, Bill, there's nothing I can say about Bill. He's everything he's got. He earned. He was somebody who came in the wrestling business like me. he made millions and millions and millions more money than I did. And, well, everything I said about him, I think is flattering. But, we weren't personal friends, even outside the business. You know, he maintained that level of social distance. And there's a money creates distance because it creates a different social status.
It seems like also, I think a lot of times you would walk into a situation where Bill was either the booker or the promoter. And you've talked about that in the past too. You can't really be friends, so to speak, with the talent when you're in that position. Now, Bill, obviously he had a camaraderie with the guys that were in that era right before you that he broke in around, of course. And then if he had like people that he considered his children, like a Dr. Death, Steve Williams. So he did have favorites along the way, but I totally get what you're saying at the same time. I'm looking over results here. You do the heel turn October 3rd. You're working Buddy Landel, your buddy, on October 10th TV, going over on Buddy, a brunette Buddy Landel, who was simply enhancement at this point, but man, did he get good really fast, did Buddy Landel. One of my favorites, really, but a lot of people say Buddy was his own worst enemy.
Yeah, but he was one of the nicest look on me. Him and Jano Hernandez, can you imagine him as a team?
Wow.
One of the nicest looking young men, just gorgeous, Adonis type guy. But with those kind of looks, sometimes comes retardation and social development, because you get by. Let's go back to that pretty blonde that went for the motorcycle guys more than the college guys.
Mm-hmm.
Her own experience was the same thing. Her good looks retarded her social development because people couldn't get past her looks to talk to her as a real person.
I gotcha.
So the wrestler didn't care about what she looked like. You know, if she came the next time, I hadn't bathed in 2 weeks, he didn't care. The same thing with Buddy. His social development was retarded, and I don't mean that he was in a way. He didn't develop social awareness.
Buddy didn't really have much of a filter, really.
No, exactly. But he was a good-hearted guy and everything, and he was his own worst enemy. So who paid? It's like all of us.
Right.
Who pays for your own things more than you do? Now, someone like Hitler or whatever is different, but for most of us...
Well, we're not comparing Buddy Landel to Hitler, by the way, guys. I get what you're saying. No. Yeah, no, Buddy Landel, I mean, as a fan, I always loved his work in the ring, but obviously as time went on, you heard the stories of substance abuse issues, but also Buddy, again, it just goes back to being his own worst enemy. You know, he's told Buddy, quit coming to TV in flip-flops and he's baggy-ass T-shirts, and he just keeps doing it. Or, Buddy, you got to be here tomorrow. You're going to win the belt. And he shows up 2 hours late. You know, so, again, Buddy, just his own worst enemy. He was going to do what he was going to do. But I thought it was awesome that you kind of had, some experience hanging around Buddy. He was the one that gave you the call. You talked to him. He said, why don't you come on down and work for the Cowboy? And that's kind of how this all got moving. So it's funny how Buddy Landel played a part in all of that. Well,
he was from Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
His family was in Knoxville. And so when we did our opposition, he hung around with us. And, I remember my wife and Buddy and myself going out we went to a gay club in Knoxville because it was a place that we could go and dance, or my wife and I could dance, and nobody messed with you. Otherwise, you couldn't go out. I mean, if you were on TV, you couldn't go out in public without, having some kind of... It wasn't that they wouldn't mess with you. They wouldn't notice you. You could go out to other clubs and you maybe be okay, but you got people watching you all the time.
Right. Sure.
You don't feel privacy. It's like when Frank Sinatra went to clubs in Vegas and every other place. He always had a room in the back, a private room. He was not in public and in a cloistered off place. He had a private room. So,
yeah, he did it his way.
Yeah, good one.
So, no, I just thought that was kind of cool because I never really tied you to Buddy Landel outside of, maybe working with him here, but I get it now. Knoxville totally makes sense. And I do believe Buddy spent some time working for Poffo a little bit too. So, but you guys meet again here in the Mid-South territory. Buddy hasn't exactly dyed his hair blonde yet and gotten the Nature Boy moniker up and going, but he is getting ready to do that. So he's going to take off not too long after this run. But right now he's just working underneath. And this week, October 10th television, it's Bob Roop over Buddy Landel. And that's where we're going to wrap it up here this week, talking about Buddy And when we return next time, guys, we're going to continue on talking about TV. You've got some television matches with Jimmy Garvin after that attack, and rightfully so. We'll talk about that. You'll also be teaming up with another man by the name of Paul Orndorff. You're on the other side now. It's going to be Orndorff and Bob Roop going up against the likes of the Junkyard Dog and Mike George, and so much more next time around here on the show.
Well, that sounds good. Yeah, I've got some interesting stories with Paul. Paul's attitude cost him, I don't know, about $7,000 or $8,000 that went, instead of going in his pocket, went in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
But, he was a good talent. Anybody that has a body that looks that great put a lot of work into it. So you gotta respect it. You're not handed those bodies. So I always respected that. Now, what people do with it is another matter.
Well, we also teased, last time on the show, a story about the Iron Sheik. I believe you said Bob Orton and perhaps a jail cell somewhere. And we teased that. We didn't get to that here this week. So I do promise next time around, we will definitely discuss that situation as well. So, we got a lot to look forward to. We haven't even gotten to your feud with Ted DiBiase over the North American title, the three-way feud with Paul Orndorff and getting involved. You guys kind of forming a friendship. But as we know, there are no friends when it comes to the the North American title. So we'll see how that all plays out moving forward. Lots of fun stuff ahead.
Well, it sounds good. For those of you out there listening, thank you very much. Missed you. Visualizing you out there listening to our stuff. Ray, thank you, my friend.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna keep rolling, man. No problem at all. I'm looking forward to it. I'm just scrolling along right now, looking at all the names, all the talent, and all the fun stuff we get to talk about next time, and likely the time after that as well. So lots to come, Bob, and I just appreciate you covering just a piece of your career here in the Mid-South Territory this week.
Well, thank you, and I think I mentioned it before, but each show is even you make a nice basic theme or a path that we're going to go down, and then I have all these little offshoots. And we'll probably continue to do that because when stories come up, I evaluate. Should I tell that story now? Maybe I'll try writing them down instead of telling them, and then you and I can talk about it later. But anyway, I enjoyed tonight. Thank you, Ray.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it here this week for the Wrestling Stoop. And oh man, the Mid-South stories did not disappoint. Just a reminder, you guys can friend Bob Roop over at facebook.com/poorBobRoop. And you can find me, Ray Russell, over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. It's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And don't forget, guys, to try it out, that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. But for now, Bob and I are leaving the airwaves. But we encourage you to check us out each and every Wednesday for another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop.